The awakening moments. The morning air was crisp as Dr. Olivia Carter stepped out of her sleek sedan, the hum of airport activity vibrating around her. Her 6-year-old daughter, Ava, bounced on her toes, her curls dancing in the sunlight. Olivia held tightly onto Ava's hand, not just as a means of guidance, but as a reminder of their bond, a bond unshaken by the challenges they faced daily. "Mom, can we get pancakes when we land?" Ava asked, her wide eyes sparkling with excitement. "Grandma's already making them, sweetheart," Olivia replied with a smile, adjusting the strap of her leather tote bag. Inside were neatly organized documents for her upcoming medical symposium and Ava's travel essentials. Olivia was the keynote speaker for a conference on pediatric neurosurgery, but this trip was also a much-needed opportunity for a mother-daughter escape. As they entered the terminal, Olivia felt the familiar tension of balancing two worlds. She was a trailblazing neurosurgeon, often the only black woman in rooms filled with white coats and clinical jargon. But here, in this bustling airport, she was just Mom, a title she cherished above all. The first-class lounge greeted them with plush chairs and quiet luxury. Olivia sank into a corner seat, exhaling softly. She had chosen first-class tickets not for indulgence, but for practicality. Ava's energy often required extra space, and Olivia needed every tool at her disposal to keep her curious daughter entertained during long flights. "Mom, look, they have marshmallows for hot chocolate," Ava exclaimed, pointing at the beverage counter. "Go ahead, but be careful," Olivia said, her tone both encouraging and cautious. She watched Ava skip away, her pink backpack bobbing with each step. Olivia adjusted the blazer draped over her shoulders, its tailored fit a shield of professionalism that hid the exhaustion of back-to-back surgeries and endless hospital meetings. As she waited, Olivia became aware of the subtle glances around her. It wasn't the first time she had felt out of place in spaces like these. A man in a crisp business suit gave her a quick once-over before focusing on his laptop. A woman with a designer bag smiled at Ava, then looked at Olivia with a flicker of curiosity. Over the years, Olivia had grown adept at interpreting these looks, a mix of surprise, judgment, and occasionally admiration. Ava returned, carefully balancing her cup of hot chocolate. "Mom, I got extra marshmallows." "Look," she said, her voice brimming with pride. "Good job, sweetie," Olivia replied, steadying the cup with her surgeon's precision. "Let's sit for a bit before we board." The lounge began to fill with passengers, mostly business travelers engrossed in their devices. Olivia helped Ava set up her tablet, ensuring her favorite games and movies were ready. This flight marked the beginning of a rare week off, a chance to recharge and reconnect with Ava. It was a luxury Olivia seldom allowed herself, but she knew the importance of these moments. Flight 1648 to Seattle, first-class boarding now at Gate C3. The announcement echoed through the lounge. "Ready for an adventure?" Olivia asked, standing and grabbing their belongings. Ava nodded enthusiastically, her curls bouncing. "Ready, Mom." Their seats in the first-class cabin were spacious and comfortable, a welcome relief after the morning rush. Ava immediately claimed the window seat, pressing her face against the glass. Olivia helped her buckle in, smiling at her daughter's boundless energy. The flight attendant, a cheerful woman named Megan, offered pre-flight beverages. Ava chose apple juice, while Olivia opted for water. As passengers settled into their seats, Olivia noticed the familiar pattern of reactions. A middle-aged man in a sharp suit paused as he passed their row, his gaze lingering on Olivia before moving to Ava. An older woman across the aisle gave them a warm smile, commenting on Ava's adorable curls. "Thank you," Olivia replied politely, her voice calm but reserved. She had mastered the art of balancing kindness with boundaries. As the plane prepared for takeoff, Olivia handed Ava a piece of gum. "Remember, chewing helps with your ears popping," she said. Ava nodded, popping the gum into her mouth and grinning. "I remember, Mom." Let's count the clouds when we're up there. The engines roared to life, and Ava squeezed Olivia's hand tightly. It's okay, sweetheart. We've done this before, Olivia reassured her, stroking her daughter's hand. When the plane leveled off, Ava's excitement turned to sleepiness. Olivia adjusted the blanket around her daughter, tucking in her beloved stuffed bunny, Snowy. As Ava drifted off, Olivia took a moment to reflect. Her daughter was her world, her reason for every late-night surgery, every academic paper, every sacrifice. Suddenly, a voice interrupted her thoughts. "Excuse me." A man in the aisle seat leaned toward Olivia. His expression was polite, but carried an air of entitlement. "I just wanted to say, you're really great with her. It's nice to see nannies so dedicated these days." Olivia blinked, her initial reaction muted by shock. The words hung in the air, heavy and presumptuous. Around her, passengers shifted uncomfortably, their attention drawn to the interaction. She forced a polite smile, her years of experience in diffusing such moments taking over. "She's my daughter," Olivia replied evenly, her tone calm but firm. The man's face reddened slightly. "Oh, I didn't mean. I just assumed." "Well, you're very professional looking," he stammered, clearly trying to backpedal. Olivia maintained her composure, her gaze steady. She could feel the eyes of nearby passengers on her, their curiosity palpable. Ava stirred in her sleep, oblivious to the exchange. "Thank you," Olivia said, her voice cool but polite. "I'm also a neurosurgeon, by the way. Being professional comes with the territory." The man's mouth opened slightly, as if to respond, but he closed it again, clearly unsure of what to say. Olivia turned her attention back to Ava, stroking her daughter's curls as the man shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The flight attendant approached, sensing the tension. "Can I get you anything, Dr. Carter?" she asked, her voice kind but pointed, emphasizing the title. Olivia smiled at her. "I'm fine, thank you." As the attendant moved on, Olivia glanced around the cabin. Some passengers avoided her gaze, while others offered small, supportive smiles. She returned her focus to Ava, letting the moment pass. She had faced worse assumptions in her career, and this was just another reminder of the barriers she continually broke. But as the plane soared above the clouds, Olivia couldn't help but feel a quiet pride. She wasn't just teaching Ava how to count the clouds or chew gum during takeoff. She was teaching her something far more important: how to navigate a world that often underestimated them, with grace, strength, and an unwavering belief in their worth. Grace under pressure. As the hum of the airplane engines settled into a soothing rhythm, Dr. Olivia Carter adjusted her seat slightly, her mind still replaying the interaction with the man across the aisle. His casual assumption gnawed at her, not because it was unique, it wasn't, but because of what it represented. She had spent years navigating spaces where her abilities were underestimated, and while she had learned to rise above it, moments like this still left their mark. Olivia glanced at her daughter, Ava, still peacefully asleep with her stuffed bunny, Snowy, nestled against her cheek. Ava's curls framed her face like a halo, her small hand clutching the edge of her blanket. The sight calmed Olivia's racing thoughts. She reminded herself of her purpose: to give Ava the life and opportunities she herself had fought so hard to achieve. Olivia reached for her tablet, intending to review her notes for the upcoming conference. The topic, Innovations in Pediatric Neurosurgery, was close to her heart, but as she opened the file, her focus faltered. Instead, she found herself scrolling through the photos stored on her device. Images of Ava's first soccer goal, a messy but joyous baking session at home, and a snapshot of the two of them at the park filled the screen. Each photo was a testament to the life Olivia had built, one moment of determination at a time. Her thoughts were interrupted by a voice nearby. "Excuse me, Dr. Carter, was it?" Olivia turned to see the flight attendant, Megan, standing beside her seat with a soft smile. "Yes, that's right," Olivia replied, setting her tablet aside. "I wanted to apologize if that gentleman's comment upset you," Megan said in a low voice, her eyes flickering toward the man across the aisle. I've been working flights long enough to notice when someone steps out of line. Olivia smiled, appreciating the gesture. Thank you, Megan. It's not the first time I faced something like that. And unfortunately, it won't be the last. Well, for what it's worth, I think it's amazing that you're here with your daughter. Setting an example like this, Megan said, her voice warm. She's lucky to have a mom like you. Olivia's heart softened at the words. Thank you. That means a lot. Megan nodded before moving on, leaving Olivia with a renewed sense of purpose. She glanced at the man across the aisle, who was now engrossed in his laptop. He avoided her gaze, seemingly uncomfortable after their earlier exchange. Olivia let it go, focusing instead on Ava, who began to stir, rubbing her eyes groggily. Mom, Ava murmured, her voice thick with sleep. Are we there yet? Not yet, sweetheart. We've got a little while to go, Olivia replied, smoothing Ava's curls. Ava sat up, hugging Snowy tightly. Can we read a story? Of course, Olivia said, reaching into her bag for Ava's favorite book. She opened it to a page they had read dozens of times, the illustrations vibrant against the white pages. As Olivia read, her voice soft and animated. Ava leaned against her shoulder, absorbed in the tale. The cabin had grown quieter, with most passengers settling into their routines. Olivia noticed the man across the aisle glancing at her and Ava occasionally, his expression unreadable. She wondered if he was reflecting on his earlier comment, but she dismissed the thought, focusing instead on the story she was sharing with Ava. As the flight continued, the in-flight meal service began. Olivia helped Ava unfold her tray table, arranging her food in a way that would minimize spills. Ava giggled as she speared a piece of fruit with her fork, the innocence of her laughter filling Olivia with warmth. Mom, can I have your cookie? Ava asked, eyeing the dessert on Olivia's tray. Only if you finish your veggies, Olivia teased, nudging the small plate of greens toward her. Ava scrunched her nose but complied, taking the small bite. Olivia chuckled, savoring the rare moment of relaxation. Her workdays were often filled with high-stakes decisions and grueling hours, leaving little time for simple joys like sharing a meal with her daughter. As they ate, the older woman across the aisle leaned over with a kind smile. Your daughter is lovely, she said. She's so polite and well-behaved. Thank you, Olivia replied, her tone warm. She's my little star. The woman nodded, her gaze lingering on Ava. It's wonderful to see a mother and daughter traveling together. It's clear how much she looks up to you. Olivia felt a swell of pride. I try my best. She keeps me grounded. The woman's smile widened. Well, you're doing a fantastic job. Their conversation was interrupted by Ava's exclamation. Mom, look, she said, pointing out the window. Olivia followed her daughter's gaze to see a breathtaking view of snow-capped mountains peeking through the clouds. The sight was awe-inspiring, a reminder of the beauty in the world. Wow, Olivia said softly. Isn't that amazing, Ava? It's like we're flying over a giant cake. Ava giggled, her imagination turning the snowy peaks into layers of frosting. Olivia laughed, her earlier frustrations melting away. These were the moments that mattered, moments of wonder, laughter, and connection. As the plane began its descent, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing their impending arrival. Olivia helped Ava gather her belongings, ensuring Snowy was safely tucked into her backpack. The man across the aisle, who had remained silent for most of the flight, suddenly spoke. Dr. Carter, he began, his tone hesitant. Olivia looked at him, her expression neutral. Yes. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for my earlier assumption. It was uncalled for, he said, his gaze earnest. You clearly have an incredible relationship with your daughter, and it's inspiring. Olivia studied him for a moment, then nodded. Thank you. I appreciate that. The man offered a small smile before returning to his laptop, and Olivia turned her attention back to Ava, who was busy zipping up her backpack. As the plane touched down, Olivia felt a sense of accomplishment, not just for navigating the flight, but for the small victory of challenging stereotypes with grace. She knew that every interaction like this, every moment of standing her ground, was a step forward, not just for herself, but for Ava and the world she would grow up in. As they disembarked, Olivia held Ava's hand tightly. They had a week of adventure and family time ahead, but Olivia knew this flight would stick with her. It was a reminder of the challenges she faced as a mother, a professional, and a Black woman, but also of the strength and resilience she carried with her every day. "Ready to see Grandma?" Olivia asked as they stepped into the terminal. "Ready," Ava replied, her excitement bubbling over. And as they walked toward the baggage claim, Olivia felt a renewed sense of purpose. This trip was about more than just a break. It was about showing Ava that no matter what challenges they faced, they could overcome them together. A lesson in strength. The buzz of the Seattle terminal was a stark contrast to the quiet of the airplane cabin. Travelers hurried to and fro, pulling luggage and balancing coffee cups as announcements echoed through the air. Olivia held Ava's hand tightly, weaving through the crowd with the ease of someone accustomed to navigating chaos. Her tailored blazer and calm demeanor made her stand out, but it was Ava's excited chatter that drew attention. "Mom, do you think Grandma has Snowy's bed ready?" Ava asked, clutching her stuffed bunny as though it were an irreplaceable treasure. Knowing Grandma, she probably made a whole little corner just for Snowy, Olivia said, smiling. She felt a warmth spreading through her chest at the thought of her mother. This trip was as much for Ava as it was for herself, a chance to reconnect, to recharge, and to remember the roots that had shaped her resilience. As they approached the baggage claim, Olivia's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen to see a text from her mother. "Can't wait to see you too. I'm parked in section B4. Look for the blue SUV. Love you." Olivia smiled, typing back a quick reply before focusing on Ava, who was now spinning in circles, humming a tune from her favorite cartoon. "Sweetheart, stay close," Olivia said gently, guiding Ava toward the luggage carousel. A group of businessmen in sharp suits stood nearby, their conversation peppered with industry jargon. Olivia caught snippets about mergers and quarterly projections as she reached for their suitcases. As she lifted the heavier bag with ease, one of the men turned toward her. He looked to be in his mid-40s, with salt and pepper hair and an air of authority. His gaze flickered to Ava and then back to Olivia. "Excuse me," he said, his tone polite but curious. "Do you need help with that?" Olivia smiled politely, the kind of smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "No, thank you. I've got it." He hesitated for a moment before stepping back, his expression thoughtful. Olivia could feel his curiosity lingering, but she turned her attention to Ava, who was bouncing on her toes, clearly ready to get moving. "Mom, can we see the Space Needle? Grandma said it's really tall, like a rocket ship." Ava's eyes were wide with excitement. "We'll see it soon, I promise," Olivia said, leading her daughter toward the exit. She spotted her mother's SUV almost immediately, the familiar blue vehicle a beacon of comfort amidst the sea of cars. Olivia's mother, Ruth, stepped out of the SUV, her face lighting up the moment she saw them. She was a petite woman with silver-streaked hair pulled into a neat bun, her warm eyes filled with pride and love. "There's my girls," Ruth exclaimed, opening her arms wide. "Grandma," Ava squealed, running toward her. She crashed into Ruth with the unbridled enthusiasm only a 6-year-old could muster. "Look at you, Miss Ava. You've grown another inch," Ruth said, kneeling to hug her tightly. "And who's this?" She gestured toward Snowy, who was tucked under Ava's arm. "It's Snowy. He came to see you too," Ava said proudly. Ruth laughed, ruffling Ava's curls. "Well, Snowy is very welcome. Let's get you both home." As they loaded the suitcases into the car, Ruth turned to Olivia. "How was the flight, sweetheart?" Olivia hesitated for a moment, then shrugged. "It was fine. A few interesting moments, but nothing I couldn't handle. Ruth raised an eyebrow, her intuition sharp as ever. Interesting, huh? You'll have to tell me about it later. Olivia smiled, appreciating her mother's ability to sense when something was on her mind. Let's just say it was a reminder of how far we've come, and how far we still have to go. The drive to Ruth's house was filled with laughter and chatter. Ava recounted the details of the flight, from the marshmallows in her hot chocolate to the snowy mountains she'd seen out the window. Ruth listened intently, asking questions and laughing at Ava's animated storytelling. When they arrived at Ruth's modest but cozy home, Ava squealed with delight. The front yard was a riot of colors, with flowers blooming in every shade imaginable. A small wooden bench sat under a cherry tree, its branches heavy with fruit. "Grandma, it's so pretty," Ava said, running toward the garden. "Thank you, sweetheart. I saved a special spot for you and your mom to help plant some new flowers," Ruth said, winking at Olivia. After unpacking and settling in, the three of them gathered in the kitchen. The scent of Ruth's famous mac and cheese filled the air, and Ava sat at the counter, helping to stir the sauce under her grandmother's watchful eye. Olivia leaned against the doorway, watching them with a sense of peace she hadn't felt in weeks. "So," Ruth said, glancing at Olivia, "what happened on the flight?" Olivia sighed, her shoulders relaxing slightly. "It's nothing new. A man assumed I was Ava's nanny. I corrected him, and he apologized. But it's the same old story." Ruth's eyes softened. "You've faced that your whole life, haven't you?" "Yes," Olivia admitted. "But I'm used to it now. What bothers me isn't the assumption itself. It's what it represents. People see me and immediately put me in a box, even when I've worked so hard to break out of it." Ruth reached out, placing a hand on Olivia's arm. "You've always been strong, Olivia. And you're teaching Ava to be strong too. She's going to grow up knowing her worth because of you." Olivia smiled, her mother's words sinking deep into her heart. "Thanks, Mom. I just want her to see that she can be anything she wants to be." "She already does," Ruth said firmly. "Now come help me set the table. Dinner's almost ready." That evening, as they sat around the dining table, Olivia found herself laughing more than she had in months. Ava was full of stories, her imagination running wild as she described her plans for the week. Ruth listened with a smile, occasionally glancing at Olivia with a look that spoke volumes. After Ava went to bed, Olivia and Ruth sat on the porch, the cool night air wrapping around them like a blanket. Fireflies danced in the yard, their soft glow adding a touch of magic to the scene. "You're doing an incredible job, Olivia," Ruth said, breaking the silence. "Don't ever doubt that." "Thanks, Mom," Olivia said, her voice quiet. "It's not always easy, but it's worth it." Ruth nodded, her gaze thoughtful. "The world may not always see you for who you are, but you're teaching Ava to rise above that. And that's the most important thing." As Olivia sat beside her mother, watching the fireflies flicker in the darkness, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She had fought hard to get to where she was, and she wasn't about to let assumptions or stereotypes diminish her achievements. For Ava's sake, and for her own, she would continue to push forward, proving to herself and the world that she was more than enough. Defying assumptions, the following morning, sunlight poured into the cozy kitchen of Ruth's home, casting warm golden rays over the breakfast table. Olivia woke to the scent of freshly brewed coffee and the soft hum of her mother's voice, singing a tune from Olivia's childhood. Ava was already up, her giggles echoing as Ruth braided her hair. "Mom, look at my braids. Grandma made them so fancy," Ava exclaimed when Olivia entered the room, holding out her tiny arms for emphasis. Olivia smiled, pouring herself a cup of coffee. "They're beautiful, sweetheart. You're going to make all the flowers jealous when we go outside today." Ruth laughed, her hands deftly weaving Ava's curls into a neat pattern. She insisted on having special garden hair. How could I say no? "Special garden hair sounds perfect," Olivia said, sitting down at the table. She took a moment to soak in the scene, the sunlight, her mother's soft laughter, Ava's unbridled joy. It was a moment of peace she hadn't realized she desperately needed. After breakfast, the three of them headed into the garden. Ruth handed Olivia and Ava matching pairs of gloves, their bright green color making Ava giggle. "Mom, we're twins now," she said, holding up her small hands next to Olivia's. They spent the morning digging, planting, and watering. Ruth guided Ava with patience, teaching her the names of each flower and explaining how to care for them. Olivia found herself lost in the rhythm of the work, her usually restless mind calm for the first time in weeks. As they worked, Ruth turned to Olivia. "Do you remember when you helped me plant roses here when you were Ava's age?" Olivia paused, brushing dirt from her gloves. "I do. You told me they were the most stubborn flowers, but when they bloomed, they were worth all the effort. And you told me you wanted to be like those roses," Ruth said with a smile. "Stubborn, strong, and beautiful." Olivia laughed softly, the memory warming her. "I guess I've always been a little stubborn." "A little?" Ruth teased, nudging her playfully. "But it's that stubbornness that's gotten you where you are today." Ava, overhearing, looked up from the flower bed. "Mom's the strongest person ever." "Right, Grandma?" "Absolutely," Ruth said, her voice filled with pride. "Your mom's one of the strongest people I know." Olivia felt a lump in her throat, but she swallowed it down, focusing on the flowers in front of her. She didn't want to get emotional. Not here, not now. Instead, she smiled at Ava. "And you're going to be just as strong, my little rose." That afternoon, they decided to explore the nearby town. Ruth suggested a local cafe for lunch, a quaint spot with outdoor seating, and a view of the harbor. Olivia and Ava were excited for the outing, and even Snowy the bunny came along, tucked securely in Ava's backpack. The cafe was bustling with activity when they arrived, a mix of locals and tourists enjoying the sunny day. Olivia noticed the usual glances as they were seated, some curious, some indifferent, and others tinged with subtle judgment. She ignored them, focusing instead on Ava, who was marveling at the boats docked in the harbor. "Mom, can we go on one of the boats?" Ava asked, her eyes wide with excitement. "Maybe later this week," Olivia replied, her tone indulgent. "Let's see what Grandma has planned first." As they waited for their food, a family at a nearby table caught Olivia's attention. The mother, a blonde woman in her 30s, was struggling to keep her two young boys seated, while the father scrolled through his phone, seemingly oblivious. Olivia couldn't help but notice the woman glancing at her and Ava, her expression unreadable. When their food arrived, Ava clapped her hands in delight at her plate of colorful pasta. Olivia helped her cut it into smaller pieces, her movements precise and efficient. Ruth watched with a knowing smile, sipping her tea. "You've always had those surgeon's hands," Ruth said. "Even when you were little, you were careful and precise with everything you did." Olivia chuckled. "I guess some things never change." The mother from the nearby table approached them, her two boys in tow. "Hi," she said hesitantly. "I just wanted to say, you have a beautiful daughter." "Thank you," Olivia said, smiling politely. The woman hesitated before continuing. "I noticed how calm and patient you are with her. It's inspiring. I struggle with these too," she added, gesturing to her sons, who were now tugging on her sleeves. Olivia's smile softened. "Parenting isn't easy, but we all do the best we can." The woman nodded, her face thoughtful. "I guess I just assumed you were her nanny at first. I didn't mean to, but—" Olivia raised a hand gently, stopping her. "It's okay. Assumptions happen. What's important is recognizing them and choosing to see people for who they really are." The woman looked relieved. "Thank you for saying that. It's something I'm trying to work on." Olivia nodded, appreciating the honesty. "We're all learning. Every day is a chance to do better." The woman smiled, thanked her, and returned to her table. Ruth watched the interaction with quiet approval, her eyes twinkling. "You handled that beautifully," she said once the woman had gone. "It's a work in progress," Olivia admitted. "But if I want Ava to grow up in a world where people see her for who she is, I have to start by setting the example." Later that evening, back at Ruth's house, Ava fell asleep early, worn out from the day's adventures. Olivia sat on the porch with her mother, a soft breeze rustling the leaves around them. "You know," Ruth began, her voice thoughtful, "every time you face these situations with grace, you're not just teaching Ava, you're teaching everyone around you." Olivia looked at her mother, her expression contemplative. "It's exhausting sometimes, always having to prove myself, but I know it's worth it." Ruth nodded. "It is. And you're not just proving yourself, you're changing minds, one interaction at a time." For a moment, they sat in silence, the sounds of the night filling the space between them. Olivia thought about the day, the garden, the cafe, the conversation with the woman. Each moment had been a reminder of the strength it took to navigate the world as a Black woman, as a mother, and as a professional. "I just hope Ava sees that she doesn't have to shrink herself to fit into anyone's expectations," Olivia said finally. "She will," Ruth said firmly, "because she has you as her guide." As the stars began to dot the night sky, Olivia felt a sense of clarity. She wasn't just living for herself. She was laying the foundation for Ava's future, ensuring that her daughter would grow up knowing her worth and her power. And in that moment, she realized that every challenge, every assumption, and every battle she faced was a step toward creating a world where Ava could thrive. The night air seemed lighter, and Olivia allowed herself a rare moment of peace. She wasn't just defying assumptions, she was building a legacy, building bridges. The next day dawned with a sky painted in soft pastels, and Olivia woke to the sound of Ava's giggles coming from the garden. Peering out the window, she saw her daughter chasing a butterfly, her curls bouncing as she ran. Ruth stood nearby, pruning roses, her expression peaceful. Olivia took a moment to savor the scene before heading downstairs to join them. She carried 2 steaming mugs of coffee, handing one to her mother. Ruth accepted it with a grateful smile. "Good morning, sunshine," Olivia called out to Ava, who stopped mid-chase to wave excitedly. "Mom, look, I found a butterfly," Ava shouted, pointing at the delicate creature now perched on a flower. "You did. You're turning into quite the nature explorer," Olivia said, crouching beside her daughter to admire the butterfly. "What's its name?" Ava thought for a moment, her face scrunched in concentration. "Mr. Wings," she declared, clapping her hands with delight. "Mr. Wings is a fine name," Olivia agreed, brushing a stray curl from Ava's face. After breakfast, Ruth suggested a trip to a nearby museum known for its interactive exhibits. Ava squealed with excitement at the idea, and Olivia readily agreed. They packed a small bag with snacks and water, and within an hour they were on their way. The museum was bustling with families and children of all ages. Olivia held Ava's hand tightly as they navigated the crowd, her mother walking beside them with the calm confidence of someone who had seen it all before. "Look, Mom, dinosaurs," Ava shouted, tugging Olivia toward a large animatronic display. Olivia laughed, allowing herself to be pulled along. Ava's enthusiasm was infectious, and soon they were immersed in the exhibits, exploring everything from ancient fossils to futuristic technology. Ruth trailed behind, snapping photos of Ava as she climbed on a replica of a prehistoric tree trunk. As they moved to the next section, a woman with 2 children approached them. She was well-dressed, her demeanor friendly, but hesitant. "Hi," the woman said, her voice tentative. "I couldn't help but notice your daughter. She's so curious and confident." Olivia smiled, always proud to hear such compliments about Ava. "Thank you. She loves learning about new things." The woman nodded, glancing at Ruth and then back to Olivia. "Are you her teacher, or maybe her tutor?" Olivia's smile tightened slightly. "I'm her mother." The woman's eyes widened in surprise. "Oh, I didn't mean to." she began, but Olivia interrupted gently. "It's okay," Olivia said, her tone measured but firm. "I'm used to it. People often assume things about me. But yes, I'm her mom. And a neurosurgeon, too." The woman blinked, clearly taken aback. "Wow, that's amazing. I didn't mean to offend. Well, you don't see that every day." Olivia raised an eyebrow, deciding to address the deeper issue. "You don't see what every day?" A black woman raising her child while pursuing a successful career. The woman flushed, fumbling for words. I didn't mean it like that. I just meant, you seem so accomplished." Olivia softened her tone, deciding to turn the moment into a teaching opportunity. "Thank you. It hasn't been easy, but I want my daughter to see that she can be anything she wants to be. And that means breaking down stereotypes, not just for myself, but for her and for others." The woman nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I admire that. It's something I need to think about more, for myself and for my kids." "I appreciate that," Olivia said, her smile genuine now. "We're all learning, aren't we?" As the woman walked away, Ruth placed a hand on Olivia's arm. "You handled that beautifully, as always." "I've had practice," Olivia replied, her tone wry. The afternoon passed in a blur of laughter and exploration. Ava insisted on trying every hands-on activity, from building a model rocket to simulating a Mars rover landing. Olivia watched her daughter with a mix of pride and awe, marveling at her boundless curiosity and fearless spirit. By the time they left the museum, Ava was yawning, her energy finally depleted. Ruth carried her to the car, the little girl's head resting on her grandmother's shoulder. "She's got your drive," Ruth said softly as she buckled Ava into her seat. "She doesn't let anything stop her. She's my world," Olivia said, her voice thick with emotion. "Everything I do is for her. And she knows that," Ruth said, placing a comforting hand on Olivia's shoulder. "But don't forget, you're allowed to do things for yourself too." That evening, as Ava slept soundly in her bed, Olivia sat with Ruth in the living room. The fire crackled softly, casting a warm glow over the room. Olivia held a glass of wine, swirling it absently as she reflected on the day. "You've always been a fighter," Ruth said, breaking the silence. "Even as a little girl, you never let anyone tell you what you could or couldn't do." Olivia smiled faintly. "Sometimes it feels like the fight never ends." "It doesn't," Ruth admitted. "But every battle you win makes it easier for the next person. You're paving the way, Olivia, not just for Ava, but for so many others." Olivia nodded, her gaze thoughtful. "I just want her to grow up in a world where she's judged by her character and her actions, not by the color of her skin or the assumptions people make." "She will," Ruth said firmly, "because you are showing her how to demand that respect." For a long moment, they sat in silence, the weight of Ruth's words settling over them like a blanket. Olivia thought about the woman at the museum, about the man on the plane, about all the moments in her life where she had been underestimated and had risen above it. She realized then that her mother was right. Every interaction, every confrontation, every victory, no matter how small, was part of a larger tapestry. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for Ava and for every little girl who would follow in her footsteps. And in that moment, Olivia felt a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't just navigating life. She was building bridges, tearing down barriers, and creating a path for the future. And for that, every fight was worth it. As the evening deepened, the crackle of the fire provided a soothing rhythm, blending seamlessly with the quiet hum of the clock on the mantel. Olivia shifted in her seat, swirling her wine glass as her thoughts lingered on the moments of the day. Her mother, Ruth, sat across from her, knitting a scarf with a calm, steady rhythm. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was filled with the kind of unspoken understanding only a mother and daughter could share. "Mom," Olivia began, her voice breaking the quiet. She hesitated, unsure of how to phrase the question that had been gnawing at her. Do you ever feel like the world sees you as one thing, but you're so much more? Ruth paused her knitting, looking up with a thoughtful expression. All the time, she said simply, her voice carrying the weight of years of experience. But I stopped letting it define me a long time ago. Olivia leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. How did you do that? How did you stop it from getting to you? Ruth set her knitting aside, folding her hands in her lap. It wasn't easy, she admitted. When I was your age, I worked as a teacher in a district where people questioned my abilities every day. My skin color, my accent, even the way I dressed, it was all under scrutiny. I used to get so angry, wondering why I had to work twice as hard just to prove I belonged. She paused, her gaze steady as she looked at Olivia. But then I realized something. Their opinions weren't a reflection of me. They were a reflection of their own ignorance. I couldn't control how they saw me, but I could control how I responded. And I chose to show them, through my actions, that I was more than their assumptions. Olivia absorbed her mother's words, feeling a sense of resonance. She thought about her own life, her journey through medical school, the long hours in the operating room, the moments of doubt and triumph. She had faced countless instances where people underestimated her. And yet, here she was, a successful neurosurgeon and a devoted mother. You're right, Olivia said finally, her voice tinged with determination. It's about how we respond. That's what makes the difference. Ruth smiled, pride evident in her eyes. Exactly. And you're already teaching Ava that lesson, even if she doesn't realize it yet. She sees how you carry yourself, how you handle challenges, and she's learning from you every day. Olivia leaned back, letting her mother's words settle in. She thought about Ava, about the way her daughter looked up to her with unwavering trust and admiration. It was a heavy responsibility, but it was one Olivia wouldn't trade for anything. The next morning, Olivia woke early, the sky still painted in shades of dawn. She decided to take a walk before Ava woke up, needing a moment to clear her head. The neighborhood was quiet, the air crisp and fresh. She walked past houses with neatly trimmed lawns, her mind wandering as her feet followed the familiar paths of her childhood. As she turned a corner, she spotted a small park where she used to play as a child. Memories flooded back, climbing the monkey bars, racing her friends across the field, and sitting on the swings, dreaming of a future where anything was possible. She sat on one of the swings now, the chains creaking softly as she swayed back and forth. The park was empty, save for the chirping of birds and the rustling of leaves. It was a moment of solitude, a chance to reflect on everything she had accomplished and everything she still wanted to achieve. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps. She looked up to see a young man jogging toward her, his expression friendly but cautious. He paused a few feet away, catching his breath. "Morning," he said, his voice polite. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" "It is," Olivia replied, her tone warm but reserved. The man gestured toward the swing next to hers. "Mind if I sit?" Olivia nodded, and he took a seat, letting the swing sway gently. For a moment, they sat in silence, watching the sun climb higher in the sky. "You from around here?" he asked eventually. "I grew up here," Olivia said, "but I live in Boston now, just visiting my mom with my daughter." "That's great," the man said with a smile. "Family time is important." Olivia nodded, feeling the weight of his words. "It is, especially when life gets so busy." The man hesitated before speaking again. "You know, I wasn't sure if I should say this, but I saw you at the museum yesterday. My wife and I were there with our son." Olivia turned to look at him, her curiosity piqued. "Oh." He nodded, his expression earnest. "We noticed how patient and engaged you were with your daughter. My wife actually mentioned it. How it was inspiring to see a parent so present." Olivia felt a flicker of surprise. "Thank you. That means a lot. I just wanted to say," he continued, his voice thoughtful, "it made me think about how I interact with my own kids. Sometimes I get so caught up in work that I forget to be in the moment with them. Seeing you with your daughter was a reminder to do better." Olivia smiled, touched by his sincerity. "We're all just doing the best we can. Parenting isn't easy, but it's worth every effort." The man nodded, his gaze distant for a moment as if reflecting on her words. "Well, thank you for the reminder." As he stood to leave, Olivia watched him jog away, a sense of fulfillment washing over her. It was a small moment, but it felt significant, a reminder that her actions, even the ones she considered routine, could ripple outward and inspire others. When Olivia returned to Ruth's house, Ava was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a bowl of cereal. Snowy the bunny sat beside her, propped up on a small pillow. "Mom, where did you go?" Ava asked, her voice curious. "Just for a walk," Olivia replied, kissing the top of Ava's head. "How's Mr. Snowy this morning?" "He's good. He says he's ready for another adventure," Ava declared, her face lighting up. Olivia laughed, sitting down beside her. "Well, we'll have to make sure he has a good one." As she listened to Ava chatter about her plans for the day, Olivia felt a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't just shaping her daughter's future. She was building bridges, inspiring others, and proving, every day, that she was so much more than the assumptions people made about her. And in doing so, she was teaching Ava to do the same. Rising above. The final day of their trip arrived with a bittersweet sense of closure. Olivia, Ava, and Ruth spent the morning in the garden, tending to the flowers they had planted earlier in the week. Ava's laughter rang out as she pointed out new blooms, her small hands brushing gently against the petals. "Look, Mom." The purple one opened up, Ava said excitedly, crouching to inspect the flower. "It's beautiful, just like you," Olivia replied, kneeling beside her daughter. She felt a pang in her chest, knowing this peaceful moment would soon be a memory. Tomorrow, they would return to Boston, and Olivia would dive back into the whirlwind of surgeries and hospital politics. Ruth watched them from her spot on the porch, her hands resting on her lap. Her eyes were soft, filled with the quiet pride of a mother who had witnessed her child grow into a remarkable woman. "You've created something wonderful here, Olivia," Ruth said, her voice carrying across the garden. Olivia looked up, meeting her mother's gaze. "What do you mean?" "I mean, Ava, this bond you two share. The way you nurture her curiosity and confidence. You're giving her everything she needs to face the world," Ruth said, her voice thick with emotion. Olivia smiled, brushing a speck of dirt from her hands. "I just want her to know that she's capable of anything. That she doesn't have to let the world define her." "And she does," Ruth said firmly, "because she has you to show her." Later that day, Olivia and Ava ventured into town for one last adventure. Ruth stayed behind, insisting they have some mother-daughter time before their trip home. Olivia chose a small cafe by the waterfront, a place she remembered fondly from her childhood. As they sipped on fresh lemonade and nibbled on cookies, Ava leaned forward, her eyes bright with curiosity. "Mom, can we come back here again? I like Grandma's house." "Of course, sweetheart," Olivia said, reaching across the table to hold her daughter's hand. "This will always be a place we can come back to." Ava smiled, her small hand tightening around Olivia's. "You're the best mom ever." The simple declaration hit Olivia like a wave. She blinked back sudden tears, squeezing Ava's hand. "Thank you, baby. That means more to me than you know." As they finished their snack, a man approached their table. He was older, with a kind face and a weathered hat. "Excuse me," he said, his voice polite. "I couldn't help but notice you too. You remind me of my daughter and granddaughter." Olivia smiled warmly. "Thank you. Are they here with you?" He shook his head, his expression wistful. "No, they live out of state. I don't see them as often as I'd like. But seeing you two together, it reminds me of what's most important." Olivia nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude. "Family is everything." The man smiled, tipping his hat before walking away. Olivia watched him go, a sense of quiet reflection settling over her. Moments like this reminded her of the connections that bound people together, the shared experiences, the unspoken understanding. That evening, back at Ruth's house, they packed their bags in preparation for the trip home. Ava helped by gathering her toys and Snowy the bunny, her chatter filling the room as Olivia folded clothes and organized their belongings. "Mom, can Snowy sit with me on the plane?" Ava asked, holding up the well-loved stuffed animal. "Of course," Olivia said, smiling. "He's an important passenger after all." Once their bags were packed, they joined Ruth on the porch for one last evening together. The stars were beginning to appear, their soft light shimmering against the darkening sky. "I'm going to miss this," Olivia said, leaning back in her chair. "The quiet, the peace." "You'll find it again," Ruth said. "It might not look the same, but it's there. You just have to make space for it." Olivia nodded, her mother's words resonating deeply. She had always been so focused on pushing forward, on achieving her goals, that she often forgot to pause and appreciate the moments of stillness. "You've done so much, Olivia," Ruth continued, her voice gentle. "But don't forget to take care of yourself. You deserve that." "I'll try, Mom," Olivia said, her voice quiet. "It's just, there's so much to do, so many expectations." Ruth reached over, placing a hand on Olivia's. "You've already exceeded every expectation, my dear. Now it's time to set your own." The next morning, the drive to the airport was filled with quiet conversation and stolen glances at the scenery. Ava was unusually subdued, clinging to Snowy and gazing out the window as if trying to memorize every detail. When they arrived at the terminal, Ruth helped unload their bags, her movements slow, as if she, too, wanted to stretch out these final moments together. "I love you, Mom," Olivia said, hugging her tightly. "Thank you for everything." "I love you too," Ruth replied, her voice thick with emotion. "And remember, you're never alone. I'm always here, and so does Ava. You've built a life full of love. Don't ever forget that." As they walked through the terminal, Ava looked up at Olivia. "Mom, can we call Grandma when we get home?" "Of course, sweetheart," Olivia said, smiling. "We'll call her as soon as we land." The flight back to Boston was uneventful, but Olivia's mind was anything but quiet. She replayed the events of the trip, the garden, the museum, the cafe, the quiet conversations with her mother. Each moment felt like a piece of a larger puzzle, a reminder of the life she was building and the legacy she wanted to leave for Ava. When they landed, Olivia took Ava's hand, their steps in sync as they walked through the bustling airport. The weight of her responsibilities as a mother and a surgeon was still there, but it felt lighter now. She was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, armed with the lessons of the past week and the unwavering love of her family. As they stepped into the crisp Boston air, Ava looked up at her, her eyes shining. "What's our next adventure, Mom?" Olivia smiled, her heart swelling with love and determination. "Whatever we want it to be, sweetheart. Whatever we want it to be." As Olivia and Ava stepped into the crisp Boston air, the bustling energy of the city greeted them with a mix of honking cars, hurried footsteps, and snippets of conversation from travelers around them. The familiar chaos felt different now, less like a storm and more like a current she could navigate with purpose. Ava held Snowy tightly, her small hand gripping Olivia's as they walked toward the curb to wait for their ride home. "Mom, I think Snowy likes flying now," Ava said, glancing at her bunny. "He didn't even get scared this time." Olivia laughed, bending down to straighten Ava's coat. "That's because Snowy knows he's safe when he's with you. You're his brave protector." Ava beamed at the praise, her wide smile a balm to Olivia's tired soul. The week with Ruth had recharged her in ways she hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just the peaceful moments or the memories created. It was the clarity she'd gained about what mattered most, her family, her resilience, and the example she was setting for Ava. That evening, after they arrived home and unpacked, Olivia sat on the couch with Ava nestled beside her, Snowy perched precariously on the armrest. The apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that only came after a long day of travel. Olivia scrolled through her phone, catching up on work emails, but her focus kept drifting to Ava, who was humming softly to herself while drawing a picture. "What are you working on, sweetheart?" Olivia asked, setting her phone down. "It's a picture of us," Ava said, holding up the paper. The drawing was a colorful swirl of stick figures, flowers, and what Olivia recognized as Ruth's garden. "See, that's you, that's me, and that's Grandma in the garden with all the flowers." Olivia leaned closer, her heart swelling. "It's beautiful, Ava. You're so creative." Ava tilted her head, studying her mother's face. "Mom, can we go back to Grandma soon?" "We will," Olivia promised, brushing a curl from Ava's forehead. "Maybe next time we'll stay even longer." "Yay," Ava said, throwing her arms around Olivia's neck. "I love Grandma. She tells the best stories." "She sure does," Olivia agreed, hugging her daughter tightly. As she held Ava, Olivia felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for Ruth, but for the strength her mother had passed down to her. She thought about the conversations they'd had during the trip, the wisdom Ruth had shared, and the quiet encouragement that had reminded Olivia of her own power. It wasn't just about breaking barriers or defying expectations. It was about living authentically and teaching Ava to do the same. The next day, Olivia returned to the hospital. As she walked through the familiar hallways, the weight of her responsibility settled on her shoulders again, but it felt different this time. Lighter, more purposeful. She greeted her colleagues with a warm smile, her usual focus sharper after the time away. During a break between surgeries, she found herself scrolling through her phone, pausing on a photo Ruth had taken of her and Ava in the garden. The two of them were laughing, their hands covered in dirt, surrounded by vibrant blooms. Olivia stared at the picture, her heart swelling with a mix of pride and determination. "Dr. Carter," a voice interrupted her thoughts. It was one of the residents, a young woman who looked nervous but eager. "Do you have a moment to review the pre-op notes for the pediatric case tomorrow?" "Of course," Olivia said, setting her phone down and focusing on the resident. As they went over the details, Olivia couldn't help but think about Ava and how one day she might choose to follow her own path in a field just as challenging and fulfilling. When the discussion ended, the resident hesitated before speaking again. "Dr. Carter, if I can say something, you're such an inspiration. The way you balance everything, it's amazing." Olivia smiled, the compliment genuine but unexpected. "Thank you. It's not always easy, but it's worth it." The resident nodded, her expression thoughtful. "It makes me feel like I can do it too, you know, even when things get tough." "You absolutely can," Olivia said, her tone firm but encouraging. "Don't let anyone make you feel like you don't belong. You have every right to be here." The resident smiled, her confidence bolstered by Olivia's words, and left to continue her work. Olivia leaned back in her chair, a sense of quiet satisfaction settling over her. She wasn't just a surgeon or a mother. She was a mentor, a guide, and an example of what was possible. That evening, Olivia picked Ava up from her after-school program. Ava ran to her, her face lighting up as she hugged Olivia tightly. "Mom, guess what?" Ava said, her voice bubbling with excitement. "We're learning about astronauts in school, and I told my teacher I want to be the first person to walk on Mars." Olivia knelt to Ava's level, her hands resting on her daughter's shoulders. "That's an incredible dream, Ava, and you can absolutely do it. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." "I won't," Ava said confidently, her eyes shining with determination. "And you'll come to watch me, right?" "I wouldn't miss it for the world," Olivia said, pulling her daughter into another hug. As they walked home together, hand in hand, Olivia felt an overwhelming sense of purpose. The world would continue to throw challenges their way, but she knew they could face them together. She was building a legacy, not just through her work or her achievements, but through the love and resilience she was passing down to Ava. And as they stepped into their apartment, the city lights twinkling outside, Olivia whispered to herself a promise. For you, Ava, I'll keep rising above.